the summer of Slug. All right, now you do it.
It's the summer of Slug.
Hey folks, welcome back. I'm your host, R.R. Slugger, and it's sure been a while since I wrote a book report. Today's topic, LEGO Space. Specifically, LEGO Space 1978 to 1992 by Tim Johnson. There have been plenty of glowing reviews about this book, but I don't think this is going to be one of them. Let's talk about it. Published by Dark Horse Books in 2023, this hardcover includes 200 pages of information, interviews, and archival photography of over a decade of LEGO space sets. In order to create this work, Tim Johnson collaborated with the LEGO Archive team, who provided him with over 1,500 photographs to choose from. Certainly, this is the most support a book on LEGO Space has received from the company officially, and it shows in the presentation. And the price tag. Oh. Being a sucker for the theme, I was definitely interested right out of the gate. But I'll admit, I had my reservations. Firstly, 1978 to 1992? Why stop there? Some of the best LEGO sets were just on the horizon. This felt like an odd, arbitrary choice that diminished the potential value of a compendium like this. In a Brickset interview, Johnson explains the decision. We decided to stop with Blacktron 2, largely because that was the end of the classic Smiley era. It was hard to choose as there were pros and cons to every cutoff point that we discussed. Jens Nygaard Knudsen moved to a different department in 1993, so that seemed a natural point, but there was no clear cutoff there, as themes he developed were released after the move. After reading the book myself, I have to say that it's definitely the point about Jens Nygaard Knudsen that rings most true. This book is a love letter to him and his work at the LEGO Group. From designing the minifigure that we all know and love today, to being the architect behind LEGO Space, Knudsen is truly at the heart of this book. Which is why it's so utterly baffling that out of the hundreds of photographs included here, there isn't a single one of Knudsen himself. Seriously. There are sections in this book where other LEGO designers are pictured, interviewed, and asked specifically about working with Knudsen, and the man in question is nowhere to be found. On my first read-through, I was confused as to who this person was that everyone kept bringing up. Did I miss something? I went back and reread earlier sections again, and no, I wasn't missing something. The book was. This sort of glaring oversight is something that I thought anyone would notice upon reviewing it, but I haven't seen this point mentioned once. It would be like writing a book about the Apple I computer and not including a picture or proper introduction of Steve Wozniak. Like, I'm pretty sure he had an important part to play in developing the thing. Anyways, I had to go to the internet to find out who Knudsen was because the book did a poor job of introducing arguably the single most important person in LEGO Space's history. That's a pretty big fumble. Now, I wouldn't make such a big deal about this if the book didn't make such a big deal about this. If the LEGO designers weren't a focus here, and I was instead supposed to only care about the pretty pictures of LEGO, then my tact would be very different. However, the book constantly comes back to Knudsen through its interviews and insight behind the sets. Remember, his involvement is cited as one of the primary reasons they chose to end the coverage in 1992. I'm completely bewildered by this. I don't know how the book made it through the proofreading process without someone chiming in and saying, "Who's this guy everyone's talking about?" I think I might have literally said that out loud the first time I read it. So, right out of the gate, I have major problems with how this book handles its premise. So much of why it exists is left up to the reader to research themselves. If I have to put the book down and turn on my computer in order to find out what's going on here, I think that speaks to a failure in recognizing what the priorities of a reader might be. Although, like I said, I seem to be alone in this criticism, so maybe I'm just a fringe case. Jay's Brick blog, which is usually home to top-tier LEGO reporting, gave this book a glowing review and never once mentioned this issue. He did admit to being friends with the author though, so maybe there's some bias coming through there, I don't know. I'm actually a big fan of Tim Johnson's other work at New Elementary, and was surprised to learn after reading this book that he's responsible for both. I don't want to harp on him too much, of course, because there may have been reasons beyond his control as to why the lead was buried here. With that being said, though, I think it was a mistake to not better explain the premise and limitations of this book within the book itself. Alright, Slugger, you're getting pretty heated in this book report. Was there anything you liked about it? Well, of course! The print quality and photography showcased here is of the highest caliber. The images are beautiful to behold, and I appreciated the behind-the-scenes look at how these models were originally lit and photographed. Inspiring stuff. The attention given to prototype images is also appreciated. I'm glad that Tim Johnson didn't waste this opportunity to work with the LEGO Archive team and brought us some never-before-seen stuff. Additionally, there's a large portion of the book dedicated to set-by-set coverage. Tim writes about the innovations each kit brought to the table, unique parts, new molds, etc. There's also a little blurb about each set that seems to represent its place in the fictional LEGO Space universe. These are also written by Tim, but to my knowledge, the book does not make this clear anywhere within. My first thought was that these were sourced from contemporary LEGO adverts. After all, Tim was working closely with the LEGO Archive team. It's certainly not outside the realm of possibility that they provided him with internal official write-ups on each set. In reality though, no, these are fictional, non-canon stories that shouldn't have any meaningful impact on how we view these sets. On a surface level, I'm totally fine with this. It's cute and fun to imagine the world in which these sets inhabit, and I don't blame Tim one bit for wanting to throw his hat into the ring here. Where I do take issue though is, again, in the presentation. These write-ups are presented side by side with official archival photos, interviews with LEGO designers, and the brand's logo emblazoned on the cover. There's nothing here to indicate that these blurbs shouldn't be taken seriously as pieces of unearthed history. Once again, I had to close my book and turn on my computer to find the answer. Is this the reality of physical media in today's day and age? Maybe I'm just out of touch, expecting a book like this to contain a foreword or debrief with the author. Even a glossary or appendix is too much to ask for, apparently. The book just stops, doesn't really end. Anyways, in my opinion, while I appreciate the effort that went into writing these stories, I ultimately believe their inclusion was a mistake. They don't gel with the archival angle the book takes everywhere else, and they lack any proper indication that they're a work of fiction. This sort of stuff is better handled in unofficial LEGO books. And on that topic, boy, do I have a couple of recommendations there. If stories written within the fictional LEGO Space universe is up your alley, then it's hard to go wrong with LEGO Space Building the Future by Peter Reid and Tim Goddard. This book chronicles the birth of the Space Federation and how its leader was slowly corrupted by an alien force. Being an unofficial product, the subject matter is allowed to stray quite far from LEGO's usual safety rails, and I was surprised by some of the events that transpire inside. My favorite though has to be LEGO Space Projects by Jeff Friesen. This paperback outlines instructions for various microscale mocks and provides write-ups and fictional design specifications for each craft. I love this. Taking inspiration from this book, I built several of the models myself, even applying a few color swaps. The world building within and the fun names and designs really endears me to this one. Both are published by No Starch Press, and it's worth mentioning that together, the duo is cheaper than LEGO's official offering. So, is LEGO Space 1978 to 1992 a must-have for LEGO Space fans? Personally, I'm torn. The new archival material contained within is certainly valuable, and I really appreciated learning about Jens Nygard Knudsen's impact on the series as a whole, even if the delivery was flawed. But I have to temper my praise with the book's unfocused priorities and debatable decisions regarding its premise. This is a LEGO Space book, not the LEGO Space book. And I genuinely think that unofficial publications do many things better than the real McCoy. Ultimately, it's a tough book to recommend, even to LEGO Space fans. It had opportunities that no other publication has had up to this point. I just wish the final result was more focused in what it sought out to achieve, rather than casting such a wide net and coming up short. With the dismissive way LEGO Space post-1992 is regarded towards the end of the book, I don't think a sequel's in the cards, at least not with Tim Johnson at the helm. After all, this book was all about the story of Jens Nygaard-Knudsen, and his departure from the department in 1993 all but seals the fate of any future release. It's a shame that what I consider to be some of the best, most diverse years of the series' history are treated as an afterthought here. But maybe it's only natural for 90s space to continue to live in the shadow of the little mono-colored astronaut. It is the order of things. Thanks for watching, everyone. Once again, this video has been brought to you by the Summer of Slug, and my thanks go out to all of those who helped make it happen. If you want in on the fun, check the link in the description. I've been your host, R.R. Slugger, and I'll see you next time for another video.